Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents Podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. Title still pending. My guest today, she is a private practice attorney focused on sex crimes and cyber abuse, mother of two, ladies and gentlemen, Lindsay Lieberman. Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today. So usually we start off with a quick background on your career. So if you would please introduce that, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the present. I am an attorney and I represent victims of sexual violence, domestic violence, and cyber abuse. I have my own firm. I have over a decade of experience as a lawyer. And in addition to offering direct legal services to people in need who have been harmed, I also provide preventative educational work through a consulting branch of my firm. And so this allows me to go into schools and PTAs and parent groups and talk to kids and adults about how to stay safe, both online and offline.
Awesome. And I definitely want to get into some of that preventative stuff, but let's hear a little bit more about you first. So have two kids, is that correct?
Yes, I have two daughters. They're ages 2 and 4.
Awesome. Do you
Do you
feel
have a
like
daughter as well?
I have a daughter? Yes, a 7-month-old, and
So
also very,
sweet.
very excited to talk to you about that as well. Do you feel like your background as a lawyer has informed the way that you're a parent at all?
Yes, in many ways. I feel like my career and my children have just totally informed one another over the past 4 years since I've had my first child. Um, my, I mean, how I raise my kids is consistent with all the skills that I've learned as a lawyer. So, working with victims of trauma and sexual violence, I have developed an empathetic approach towards communications and talking to people. I lead with compassion. I am trauma informed, trauma sensitive, and so I try to parent in the same way. I try to treat my daughters with the same respect that I would treat anyone that would come into my law firm who needs help. And so it helps me to really be patient with them and compassionate with them and help them get through the tantrums and the hard moments.
Hmm, that makes sense. So tell us a little bit more about just how you balance everything. You have your own private practice now. You have two kids. How are you finding time to manage those two things?
So it's it's a fun challenge, um, as I'm sure you can relate to, because I know you have your baby and you have a number of different hats that you're wearing in your career too.
Sure.
So what I do is what I've learned is that if I'm trying to do two of the things at the same time, it never goes well. If I'm with my kids and trying to entertain them and be with them, and I'm also checking my work email, I'm not being a good parent and I'm not being a good law firm owner. So I really try to stick all of my work between the hours of 9 to 5, and then I devote my nights and my weekends to my family. And this strict time boundary allows me to really be present in whichever activity I'm doing, and also helps me to not feel like resentful if I'm like with my kids, but I feel like, oh, I've got to get that work done. It's like, it's not even an option. And of course, if a client has like an emergency and there's some like situation that has to be dealt with, of course, I'd make an exception. I have a helpful husband, thankfully. Um, but I try to keep it to those strict schedules.
Was it a challenge making the transition from working full time, like at a firm, to going out on your own? I feel like a lot of people have that desire to maybe it'll create a little bit more work life balance and a little bit more flexibility in their schedules, but it's hard to start up your own thing. So especially when you're a parent. So what was that like?
Exactly. It was totally challenging. Um, and I was listening to one of your podcasts with another guest from a bit ago, and she said something like a soul promotion she got a promotion in her soul,
Mhm.
and I love that, and I feel like that's what happened to me when I went from working for a firm to having my kids and starting my own thing. Because yes, I took a pay cut. I could have gone and worked for another firm or another company and made more money,
Yeah,
but I was able to set my own schedule and spend that really precious time when your babies are first born with my babies. And that was everything and worth all the money in the world.
sure. So the work that you do is can be emotionally taxing, I imagine, given the topic. So how do you, or are you able to just kind of turn that off at 5 o'clock? Is it hard not to take that with you into the later parts of your day?
Um, yeah, I've been in this industry for so long, um, over a decade of working with victims of trauma. So it's all I know. I mean, this is all I know, what to do with my life, and it feels like a calling. So it feels like at this point I am able to set up some emotional boundaries and keep my work at work. And I also practice meditation, and I practice other forms of self care to be able to take care of myself in those ways, so that I don't have to, so that I don't let the intensity of those topics come over to how I'm parenting. And at the same time, some of the intensity of those topics has helped me to like be a more informed parent and to make better decisions in how I bring up my children to keep them safe.
Yeah. Well, that's something else I'm really interested to hear about because once I became a father, you just you have this little being that you have to just worry about now, right? And I have a daughter, so there's additional things to worry about with a daughter, and you're exposed to you personally, like you're exposed to like some of the worst evils out there, right? So how do you not just feel like um, that like just such a daunting environment for your kids to have to grow up in? Like, does it make you feel like more jaded to like what their experience is going to be?
I feel I actually feel like kind of grateful that I'm on this side of it, that like those bad things exist, they're all out there. And I feel fortunate that I know about what they look like. So I have the information that I can keep my kids as safe as possible. We can't protect our kids from everything. And so I do work on sort of trying to give up some sense of that I'm not going to be able to control everything. Um, but yeah, I think, even if I wasn't in this field, what parent isn't worried about their kids like every moment?
Sure. Yeah, it's like how much more worried could you be? I guess if you're already if you're already worried, right? Uh,
Exactly. And,
yeah.
the worries at 7 months, they change. And then there will be new worries at 2, and then new worries at 4, and and that every stage is just the worries change, but they're still there. We just have to do our best to keep them protected while we can and keep them informed and empowered for when we can't be with them.
Well, I was chatting to you before we pressed record, and you mentioned that becoming a mom kind of created some spark in your desire to was it to go out on your own or was to focus more on what you're focusing on? Can you share a little bit more about how becoming a mom changed the way you approach your career?
Sure. So I've always represented crime victims. I worked as a prosecutor in the Kings County District Attorney's Office. I was a victims' rights attorney at another firm. And it was once I started having my babies that I realized, okay, I've had all this experience after the fact. After that terrible act has happened, I can come in and help that person navigate her rights and understand her legal options and try to get her justice. But having my kids inspired me to think about how can I prevent some of this from happening? How can I make the world a safer place so that clients don't need to come to me for legal services because less of this is happening. So having my babies, my girls, yeah, inspired me in that sense to try and get into some of the prevention work and educate schools and students and parents and teachers, and try to make the internet and the world just a slightly safer place if possible for my kids, for their friends, for that generation.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the prevention. So, specifically when it comes to things like cyberbullying, definitely something that's starting to be on my mind. Obviously, my daughter can't use a phone yet, but what are some of the ways that we can do prevention? So, let's start first with just the entire abstinence. So, do you recommend that we just keep our kids off of phones and social media as long as possible as a starting point?
I don't have a blanket recommendation because every family is different and every community is different and every child has different needs. I know there's a lot of campaigns about waiting and abstinence for as long as possible. But I know that those abstinence programs, when it came to sex, weren't as effective as
Sure.
people hoped that they would be. And I think it can be the same situation with tech. Um, Now you can delay giving your child a phone, but still in, teach them about tech and about cyber. And so that's what I would suggest, that if you are going to delay, which I will likely do when my kids reach that age based on what I know, I'm I'm not going to approach it with like my head down, just assuming that nothing's going to happen or that they're not going to be able to get tech when they're not with me, because they will be. They'll have it at their friends' houses. They'll have it at school. Um, so I'm going to make sure that I educate them on how to be safe online and how to be compassionate and not bully or be a good bystander, even if I don't give them cell phones at fifth grade or whenever their friends are getting the cell phones.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter's already obsessed with the phone. She's already trying to reach for it all the time. So I know I'm screwed, but I'm gonna do
Yeah,
I'm gonna do my best.
it's it's amazing. I saw a meme the other day that was like, my toddler can't like wipe his butt or like get his clothes on or do a zipper, but when it comes to my iPad, he could like change my Facebook password and
Right. Yeah.
order Netflix. Like,
Yeah. Right. Okay. So let's say we're a little bit older now, 13, 14, and we have our daughters have phones, and then what are we doing? Is it still restricting the apps that they can use, or how do we, when they actually start to touch these cyber areas, how do we help prevent some of these challenging issues?
yeah, parental controls, being really involved in what apps they have access to, um, setting it up so that they have to ask you before they download apps. I mean, you're in control. These are going to be your devices so long as they're under 18 and you've bought them for them. So we have an obligation to really keep up on the tech and make sure that we're doing everything we can within the tech to keep on top of what they're doing. So that's monitoring their activity, seeing who they're talking to and what they're talking about, um, and also setting guidelines and like boundaries and rules about tech use. We have to make it very clear what we expect of them, the same way we make it clear what we expect of them when they go out in public with their friends. There are certain risks and dangers that are out there. And so we want to make sure that they know that there's an expectation that they're not going to do certain risky behaviors because they're aware of the potential consequences.
So when did cyberbullying really start in
Mm.
society?
Well, I remember being on America Online in the 90s, and I don't know if I remember specific bullying, but I remember like impersonation. I remember like one kid would come online and say it wasn't the person whose screen name it was someone else, and like trick somebody. Like,
Yeah.
so it probably started as soon as messaging on the internet started.
Yeah. It,
Um,
do you think that it's gotten worse because of now that we have photo and video? Do you think that that's had a more detrimental effect?
Oh, yes. Oh, it's horrific. So a lot of the cases that I deal with are cases of like revenge porn or sextortion, which are both forms of cyber abuse that involve naked pictures or naked videos.
Yeah.
And of course, the violation reported in those kinds of cases are just as bad as in-person sexual violations. But now, even notwithstanding those types of crimes, now people are using artificial intelligence to take a clothed person's picture and put a naked body on them. Somebody just did it to Taylor Swift, as you may have seen in the news recently.
I did
Um,
see that. Yeah.
and so, it just, it's alarming. Like, you know, our girls might never ever take a naked picture of themselves. Hopefully they don't, but things still happen. People who are bad and have bad intentions can still target people. So we have to be really informed and on notice and prepared, and with also the information about what to do if it should happen to you.
So when you think of cyberbullying and when you work with it, are you more really talking about this like circulating of pictures that shouldn't be circulated and things like that, or is it also just what you think of as bullying as like just name calling and saying, hey, you're an idiot in cyber form?
Yes, both. So I represent a number of parents who have children in schools who have been cyberbullied, and it doesn't have to have like a sexual nexus, but they'll hire me to represent their child and their interests as it relates to the school, as it relates to getting protective measures in place, or potentially if it's a crime to file a police report and take other legal measures.
What are some of the effects that you've seen on the child?
Oh, it's just horrific. This kind of stuff is so detrimental and so scary. Um, Victims of any age suffer serious psychological and emotional trauma and distress. Um, and it's just a very deep form of humiliation because, when you're assaulted in person, there's not necessarily a video of it. There's not necessarily like a public viewing of it.
Yeah.
When it's online, there's this sense that it's like it's being watched by everybody and it can live forever. We know we have these digital footprints of our lives on the internet. And so, I mean, the harm is profound.
So it could be more harmful than just getting physically assaulted, bullied.
It depends on the case, but some people say that it does feel like an even worse violation. But every case is different. Every person's experience is different, of course. But what's important is that people realize how serious it is, that it can be as serious. Because back in the day, and for some people out there, they think, oh, it's the internet. It's not real life. It's just the computer. Just
Yeah,
shut
yeah.
your computer and go away. But now we know that, like, no, like online is real life. Most of us are spending more of our days on the internet than off the internet. So when a crime happens on the internet, that is real life and that's real harm.
And I think people are bolder online because they're behind a screen. They might not even be revealing the true identity. So I feel like people are emboldened to be more cruel and just not feel like you wouldn't necessarily say these things to somebody's face, but it's easy to say them behind a screen, right?
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to start talking to our kids really young about compassion and empathy and how to stand up for somebody and be a good bystander, because it's just so much easier for all of that really hateful, hurtful thing stuff to be said online.
Yeah. So who does this affect? Does it affect more of one sex than the other? Is there a certain age range that it affects more than the other, or do you really see anybody under 18?
Well, if we're talking about the sexual offenses, I want to first start with the disclaimer that if anybody has any naked or nude images or videos of themselves under 18, that's child sex abuse material. So that's illegal. It shouldn't be in existence. But of course, what I see is sometimes children are manipulated into creating it, and they're manipulated by groomers and perpetrators who they meet on gaming sites and social media. um, and so once they've created this child sex abuse material, then the perpetrator can use that as leverage to get the child to do whatever they want, whether it's to continue creating the material or doing worse, sending money. And the fear for the child is, I just committed a crime. Like, not only am I completely humiliated and vulnerable, but I can't tell my parents, I can't tell the school, I've committed a crime. Um, so it's really really uh, challenging. Wait, let me get back to this. But you had asked who it's who. So both girls and boys wind up being subjected to this kind of abuse online.
Yeah.
Um, I found that sometimes boys are more willing or trusting of people that they're communicating with on the internet to think that it's like somebody that they can trust. And so they might be faster to take off their clothes or to to do some sort of sex act online,
Yeah.
um, and then wind up extorted.
Right. And is there any age range that's the most vulnerable, or anybody that's under 18 is susceptible?
Yeah. And yeah, I don't have the statistics on that.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So is there anything else that you'd want listeners to know? Most of the listeners are parents themselves. Is there anything else that you want them to know about how to prevent cyberbullying and signs to look out for, and anything else from your expertise that'd be important for them to hear?
I would love to share with parents one thing that I talk about with parent groups about how to keep their kids safe and private online. And I think it's helpful for parents to think about this. And that's that we want to model healthy, smart tech use for our kids. So, um, what that looks like is a few different things. One is that if we want our kids to be okay waiting to get the phone, and we want our kids to have a healthy relationship with their phones once they have it, we want to show them that we have control, that we don't impulsively look at our phones every 5 seconds. And of
Hmm.
course, that's so hard to do. And I'm constantly working at it. But if we can think about how that could have a positive impact on our children's relationship with phones,
Yeah.
it can motivate us to be better about it.
So me being on my phone while I'm feeding my daughter's bottle is a huge no-no. Is what we're saying.
Listen, every family is different and everybody's busy, and I have no judgment whatsoever. But if you take a moment to think about what she's seeing, what she's experiencing, you could be losing out on an opportunity to bond with her. And you could be unintentionally instilling in her this idea that, ooh, whatever's on that phone must be really interesting. And
Totally.
once I get that phone in my hands, like I'm going to just do exactly what my dad's doing.
Uh,
So, something to think about.
man, it's so true. Sucked up,
So,
man.
one more thought on privacy and the internet
Yes.
is for all the parents out there with little ones, I always caution you to think twice and maybe three times before posting pictures and videos of your children on social media. And I know that's
I
really
was just
hard.
going to ask you this because I feel like the big trend now is actually to cover up kids' faces, under a certain age. I guess the theory being like until they can really consent to being on there, you should not show that. So again, yeah. So like my 7 month old, you're saying no, no baby photos.
So I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't post pictures of my baby. And this is why I've seen cases where disgusting, terrible people out there take baby photos and photos of little kids and do horrific things about them. Like we just talked about with the AI, the deep fake.
Yeah,
Um, and a lot of people say, like, well, I'm private, only my friends can follow me. But our friends can get hacked. And who really knows if all of the friends who are following us are who we think they are? And privacy settings change all the time when you do like an upgrade on your apps. So, like, once those pictures are out there, we lose control over where they wind up, no matter how private you are. But it's not just the pictures themselves. If you think about like posting a birth announcement, you've posted their birthday, their name, a picture of what they look like,
their weight,
and
their weight and height.
their weight and height. And you're basically starting like a digital record of personal information about your baby that somebody who has bad intentions can track and follow. And so in a few years, you're going to be posting pictures of their school that they attend, maybe like a picture of them in front of their school, and the school is identifiable on Google Maps. And maybe you start posting pictures and videos of the things that they like to do and their interests, and they have their birthday already. And so it's like all this information, you're laying breadcrumbs for somebody who has bad intentions to to get access to your child. Um, and so I just tell people about that because I think it's helpful to think about. I'm not saying that everybody needs to shut it all down. Everyone should make the decision for themselves, But if we're just more mindful about the risks, I think some people might make different decisions.
So, are you personally thinking even when they're teenagers, you wouldn't be posting about them?
Well, by the time they're teenagers, they'll probably tell me not to post about them, I imagine.
Yeah, that's true.
um,
Or they'll say sure, or they'll say, well, I think that's part of the reason why people cover up their kids' faces, right? Because the kids can't really say if they want to be on there or not. So I guess at some point they can then agree that they'd want their picture on your Facebook.
Exactly. But what do I get from it? If I want to share my kids' accomplishments, I can send an email to close friends and family, or I have like an iCloud album where I post pictures. So, my close, trusted handful of friends and family can see and enjoy. But like you said, it's not my identity to share. It's not my personal information to share. It's theirs, and they should have total control over that.
But to your point about like the digital breadcrumbs and just sharing all of that, to me that would really mean that the child shouldn't be on social media at all until they're 18. Is that kind of what you would ideally advise as well?
Well, again, ideals are one thing, reality is another. I don't think it's possible to prevent teenagers from getting on social media. I think by the time teenagers are getting on social media, they have more information. Hopefully, they've been informed. They know the risks. They know how to be smart, safe digital users. So they have the ability to consent to having some sort of persona online. But how public it is or what they're posting, I mean, all of that is so crucial to be discussed, to have boundaries around, and that's everything. So yeah, we're not going to prevent them from being online, but we can allow them to be online in safe ways.
And first of all, who knows what online looks like 13 years from now? I mean, it could be just all in our brains and a microchip, or it could be we could be in the Stone Age by then. I mean, who knows? The
Exactly.
AI overlords could be taken over by then. But assuming it's current technology, right?
Exactly. We could be on the moon.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we're gonna move into the final segment called Lindsay's Advice Corner. So I'm gonna ask you for some advice on a few topics. Okay, you ready?
Okay, sure.
So, what advice do you have for self care as a working parent?
So yes, I mentioned meditation because I know you've had a number of podcasts about meditation and I've been listening. And
Yeah.
meditation is something I've recently gotten into and finding it so valuable. So I have a practice now. Do you know Savers? Hal Elrod. He's a personal development guy, and
I know
he
how
has
Elrod.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he has this app, The Miracle Morning, where you go through Savers, like you do um, all of these activities every morning to start your day as like positively as possible. So you do silence, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, reading, and scribing. And so every morning, I try to do as many of those as possible to just kind of start my day off, feeling good and balanced and motivated. Um, my husband and I also do a couples meditation once a week. And so we're really been like diving into that as a form of self care. I exercise, but, and that helps. Um, and yeah, so I encourage parents to find what works and to try new things because meditation is totally new to me, and just make it happen, fit it in, no matter what.
When you're doing this morning thing, are you doing it before your kids wake up, or how you actually carry on the time of the morning?
Yes, I have to wake up before they wake up to do it. Otherwise, I can't do it.
Right. Sure.
As soon
Yeah.
as they're awake, my
That's it.
mind
Yeah.
is not there.
Totally. No, I can relate to that as well. Um, what advice do you have for somebody who's about to be a parent, but they still have a career that they want to focus on?
Well, it's interesting because for my personal experience, I wasn't sure prior to having my first baby how I would feel about parenting and my career. I didn't know like what kind of mom I would be. And I think sometimes parents feel like they're going to be one kind of parent and they wind up being the other. So I So I would suggest to keep an open mind. What I mean is, I went into having my first baby thinking like I might consider being a stay-at-home parent one day. Like who knows? I might love this parenting thing. And then I had my maternity leave and I realized very early on that that baby was the best thing that ever happened to me, but I couldn't wait to get back to work. Not because I didn't like being with her, but she actually like inspired me to like work harder
Sure.
and to like make her proud and to do big important things to help people in the world.
Yeah.
So so you can have the career and have the babies and be a great parent and also work and everything. There's time for everything. You make it work.
Love that. What is the best advice you've ever received
Ooh.
about anything? Doesn't have to be about parenting.
Oh my god, it's so hard. You should have cued me with that one.
Take your time.
What's the best advice I've ever received?
Or what advice comes to mind when you hear that?
Um okay, the best advice I've ever received is to pause. Because in my family life and in my work life, things come up that are intense or um, or shocking or time sensitive, and oftentimes we can have this impulse to want to like react right away. And what I'm finding is that consistent with this advice I received, the best thing that I can do is to just pause for a second, think about how I'm going to respond, think about what's really happening in terms of the other person's experience and what they're needing or what they're looking for. And then I find that my response is usually more compassionate and more uh, thought out.
Yeah, sure. Intentional.
Yes. And then I find that my response is more thoughtful, compassionate, intentional, and that can really make a difference in conversations and communications with your husband or your kids or your clients. And so that's been very helpful for me.
What advice would you give to your former self?
Hmm.
Don't get a phone. Don't go online.
um, these are hard. Can we skip?
Yeah, you just give it. Yeah.
It took me so long to figure out my answer to the other one.
Yeah. Well, all this blank space won't be there. So don't worry about it. There's only one more
I know.
question. So
Okay, let's hear it.
okay, last question. By the time this podcast comes out, I think my daughter will be about 8 months old. So, other than never ever let her online, what advice do you have for me as a father of an 8-month-old daughter?
Ah, well, based on what you've mentioned, I would encourage you to take some of that time while you're feeding her to look at her and engage with her and put the phone down because those precious moments are so sweet and they're gonna stop happening so fast.
I
Um,
know.
so really just enjoy her and be present with her, and that's the best thing you can give to her
Yeah.
and keep her face and name and birthday offline.
Okay. I have some retroactive scrubbing to do, but I'll get to it. All right, Lindsay, this has been a great conversation. Where can listeners go to learn more about you, connect with you, anything that you'd like to share or promote?
Uh, Thanks so much. My website is lindsaylieberman.com. I have an Instagram that I'm developing, which is Lindsay Lieberman ESQ. And I'm happy to hear from any parents out there or parent groups or anyone who's unfortunately had something happen in their families. Reach out and I'm here to help.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link to all that in the show notes. Lindsay Lieberman, ladies and gentlemen. Lindsay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.